God in ordinary. When the Archbishop of Cape Town launched this JustWater initiative in February, he spoke movingly about the preciousness of water, particularly in those parts of the world where water is scarce. He encouraged us to think about water as holy, as we should think of all the gifts of God's creation. Archbishop Tarbo's words cause me to think about one of my favourite paintings in the National Gallery. It's a still life of a cup of water and a rose by the 17th century Spanish artist Zurbarán. A delicate white ceramic cup is filled almost to the brim with water. A pink rose rests on the rim of the plate and is delicately reflected in it. The wooden shelf on which they sit and the dark background, coupled with the soft light, display life-sized objects of exquisite beauty, almost sacramental in the way they convey the holiness of the ordinary. In the first of the creation stories, gosh, that's a clue to those who would think that this is a piece of history or science. In the first of the creation stories, that there are two means there are a different sort of mythology, trying to explain something about what it is for us to be human in God's creation. At the beginning of the book of Genesis, as God made everything after each day, there is a refrain, and God saw that it was good. Just water, ordinary, only water, and it was very good. 70% of the planet is covered by water, 326 million trillion gallons of it. I wonder who worked that out and how accurate it is. 97% of it is salty, 2% of it is ice, which means 1% is fresh water for all humanity's needs. Water is a precious commodity, a scarce resource, increasingly contested and a focus for disputes. Under control, it is the means of good health, well-being, safety and power. Out of control, it can bring floods, death and destruction. The biblical image from the first creation story in the book of Genesis is of God's Spirit moving over the face of the waters, creating life out of chaos. Water connects us. Environmental issues do not know national boundaries. Walls do not stop them. The plastic rubbish that's collected in the Pacific Ocean belongs to us all. Water has the potential to bring us together, to live together in one world, because there is the risk that if we do not do so, we have the destructive power and the lazy arrogance that could mean there is no world. The care of the earth is the care of our common home. There is no planet B. Just water and the care of creation seems a strange theme for Palm Sunday at the start of Holy Week, as we set out to reenact the way of the cross. The connection might be made through the waters of baptism, by which Christians are baptized into the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, becoming disciples who walk in the way of the cross. JustWater. In Salisbury Cathedral, where I come from, there is a huge font. Designed by William Pye, it was installed in 2008 to mark the 750th anniversary of the consecration of the cathedral. It sits at the centre of the nave as you enter from the great west door, a great brimming bowl of water made of green patinated bronze in a cruciform shape 3 meters wide. It holds 1,300 litres of water, which on the surface looks like glass, but overflows at the 4 lips of the cross. Around its edge is a text from Isaiah 42, verses 1 and 2. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. At the preparation for baptism of adults, I often ask candidates about the significance of water. What percentage of us is water? Answer: about 78% for a baby, 60% for an adult man, average about 65% of us is water. We were carried by our mother in a sack of amniotic fluid and were born when her waters broke and we were pushed out into the world, and so on. Through the water of baptism, we who are wonderfully and fearfully made in God's image are born again through the waters of baptism into Christ's death and resurrection. The Spirit of God is breathed into us. We become members of the Christian Church. Physically, we enter into the body of the Church and through the font are brought into a place in which the community gather in worship at an altar where we take bread and wine, as the Lord Jesus Christ told his disciples to do in memory of him. The second reading tonight was the story of the wedding at Cana in Galilee from John chapter 2. It's an on the third day story, a resurrection story, the first of the signs in John's Gospel when water is turned miraculously into wine. Here, the ordinary, extraordinary gifts of creation are transformed as the water of the rites of purification in the Old Covenant become the wine of the new. Through baptism, Christians enter a community of faith, a school for disciples who seek to follow in the way of Jesus Christ. The Church, a laboratory of the Spirit in which the love of God is what makes us fully human. In George Herbert's memorable phrase, here is heaven in ordinary, man well dressed. The goodness and the beauty of holiness that we meet in worship is very compelling as we find ourselves made and remade, formed and transformed, transfigured through the love of God. Our relationships with one another and the great wide earth put right. The poet Thomas Traherne says your enjoyment of this world is never right till every morning you awake as if in heaven. See yourself in your Father's palace and look upon the skies, the earth, and air as celestial joys. And he might have added water. And this community in which we gather formed in worship, comes to seek peace, justice, truth, love, lived here and now in an earth where those values are desperately short in supply. We gather to fulfill that agenda that Jesus read from the prophet Isaiah about in the synagogue in Nazareth at the start of his ministry, that he will bring good news to the oppressed, bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to captives, release to prisoners, and proclaim the year of the Lord's favour. This community gathers in search of justice and water. Just water, just water. When Archbishop Tarbow spoke at the launch of JustWater, of the precious holiness of water, he went on to make something very basic, but important and practical. Water is life, he said. Sanitation is dignity. More than half the households worldwide have access to clean water in their homes. That means something like 40% don't. The number of people without a safe toilet is increasing as people move into ever more crowded cities. Diseases caused by contaminated water kill more people every year than all forms of violence, including war. By prioritising clean water, we can improve the health and livelihoods of millions of people. The vision of the Sustainable Development Goals, agreed by the United Nations, is that by 2030, everyone will have safe drinking water. That's a political choice. We can do it, but we need to want to do it. To tackle the Sustainable Development Goals, to provide clean water for everyone, is going to depend on developing partnerships. And the Church, which is local everywhere, can work with charities, with NGOs, with governments and business. This is all our responsibility. And it's why the JustWater initiative has been taking place in communities around the world, in Melbourne and Wall Street, New York and Cape Town, as well as here at St. Paul's. One of my responsibilities as the Church of England's lead bishop on the environment is not to do with the technical issues of economics, politics and science, but the spiritual gap between what we say we want and believe and what we do. It's not a new problem. St. Paul in the Epistle to the Romans says, "The good that I would, I do not, and that which I do, I would not." The churches and the other faith communities have some experience of addressing this spiritual gap. It's what we do. There's nothing more important or pressing in our world than that spiritual gap, which is a disconnect and which creates a threat of death rather than life in all its fullness. Our commitment to doing good is undoubted, to providing safe drinking water and clean sanitation for all. Water is life. Sanitation is dignity. How to achieve it is more pressing. It's a question of justice, of just water. This Holy Week, as we walk with Christ on the way of the cross, we make a choice. We see that life is precious, a holy gift, and we are called to love God and love our neighbours as ourselves, to walk in the way of Jesus Christ and live lives of service. Just water, ordinary, precious, holy water, used justly, will quench thirst, wash feet, give life to the glory of God in ordinary. Amen.